What's going on, YouTube Metal Complex here, and today I've got another knife review slash overview to do for your entertainment. This is the Gerber 06 automatic. This is a USA-made automatic knife from Gerber that's in S30V. Now, a lot of you are, actually I would venture to guess most of you are very familiar with this knife, or at least aware of it, because this knife has been around for a very long time. I've got a special place in my heart for this knife, so I was very appreciative when one of my viewers graciously offered it up for review on this channel, along with a lot of other stuff. If you watched that video where I unboxed like 4 knives here recently, these were all from the same person, so you know who you are. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you letting me take a look here. We'll get into my personal relationship with this knife here in a sec. Let's go ahead and take some measurements here. Overall length on this guy, 8.5 inches if you go tip to glass breaker. If you go tip to butt, it's about 8.25. Blade length officially is 3.7 inches, which looks to be fairly accurate. Cutting edge is probably it's like 3.3 inches overall. Let's do some size comparisons here. Up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1 coming in at 8.6 inches overall. Very similar in length to the Rat 1. Paramilitary 2. PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall. Also very similar in size to the PM2. Up against the Hinderer XM18. XM18 coming in at 8.25 inches overall. How about the Benchmade Griptilian or Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall. And last but not least, how about the Spyderco Delica? Spyderco Delica coming in at 7 inches overall. Next up, let's weigh it. I can tell you guys, I'm guessing she's going to be pretty hefty. That is some serious thickness. Look at the thickness compared to the XM18. I know this is solid titanium, but check this out. It feels like, so here's the XM18, 6.38. 7.2 ounces. This is a 7.2 ounce knife. Now, I say it all the time. Weight doesn't really bother me all that much, up to about 6.5 ounces. I like the feeling of heft over the loss of confidence that I get with a knife that's ultra light. I'm backwards from most people's thought process. I just like the heft. It makes me feel good about what I'm carrying. But everybody's got their limit. For me, it's 6.5 ounces. This is just a really, really heavy knife. I mean, it makes sense. This knife is made out of aluminum and steel liners, this material here, despite it not looking like aluminum up close. If you look it up right now, this is the multicam version. So there it says multicam. It comes in black also, and you can also get it serrated, and it's probably some other different options. But they run 125 bucks, aluminum and steel. It makes sense, given the thickness, that it would weigh 7 ounces. So on top of that, it's a pretty long blade, and blade thickness probably 130, maybe 130 thousandths, something like that. Thicker than the Manix 2, but not quite as thick as the PM2. We'll go over the anatomy of the knife, and then I'll kind of talk about my relationship with this thing. The blade shape is really nice. Nice classic drop point blade. You've got a swedge that runs at about 85% the length there, so maintaining strength to the tip all the way down, or most of the way. It's overtaken by a swedge that looks nice, gives it that classic look. And honestly, it looks really nice in the black DLC. I hate this billboarding on the other side. It's like someone just stamped it, like they were going to mail the knife, like they're just going to put the knife in the mail like this with a stamp. It looks bad. Now, I will admit, though, I like Gerber's sword and shield emblem. I think that looks really cool. It's classy. It's neat. It's too bad that it sends people running for the hills nowadays. But like I said, this is a USA-made Gerber, and all the Gerbers that I've handled on this channel and have spoken negatively about, those have all been non-USA Gerbers. And I really hate those, but I've got some good things to say about this one, so definitely stick around. The pivot here, we've got a nice large Torx head sized, or I'm sorry, a Torx button head pivot that goes most of the way through to the other side, much like a Strider or Hinderer pivot. That generally is indicative of additional pivot strength. Not always, though. Larger button head Torx screw that holds in the very large stop pin. You can see in there how robust all of this hardware is. That's a plunge lock. We'll talk about that here in a sec. You have a nice raised switch button, which I actually really like. You know, this knife reminds me a lot of the Benchmade AFO2. The AFO2 is just not quite as aggressive. Like the lines are just a little bit more subdued on the AFO2. The AFO2 has a recessed button and the safety switch is actually out here. I prefer the safety switch being out here, but honestly, I like how this is pushed up a little bit. You know, a lot of people will say, well, if it's recessed, you're less likely to accidentally push it or have it go off in your pocket. Yeah, that's probably true, but I mean, where are we getting the data on that? How many people, I mean, do we have data that shows like how many people are walking around with automatic knives, and of those people walking around with automatic knives, how many of them are carrying ones with recessed buttons and raised buttons, and how often do they go off? I'm thinking nobody's collected that data. And I've carried a lot of automatic knives, both with recessed buttons and non-recessed buttons, and I can tell you the amount of times they've gone off in my pocket is 0. So I don't really care. That's just me. I just don't care. I imagine if you're running with this thing in your pocket all the time, or you're an actual soldier, maybe that's different for you. I don't know. The switch is very easy to access, given that it's got the texturing right there. But like I said, I wish it was back here. That's okay. The camo's fine. It's not my top choice, but that's a preference thing. I would have just chosen black. These lines here offer a little bit of traction, not much. It's otherwise kind of slippery. You do have more of these larger torque size screws back here that hold in the backspacer / glass breaker / lanyard hole. In my opinion, that's how you do a glass breaker. There's a lot of material to back it up, and I honestly believe you could break glass with this and keep breaking more glass over time if you're the type of person who breaks a lot of glass with a pocket knife. Mainly what I'm saying is versus knives like the Benchmade Contigo that has that little tiny little bead at the end. I feel like I could smash that thing flat pretty easily. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like that thing would become useless a lot faster than something like this. So if there has to be a glass breaker on a knife, or if I really, really need a glass breaker, which is unlikely, that's the glass breaker that I would want. It makes sense on this knife. I get it. Moving over to the other side, you've got a really super weird pocket clip, but it does its job. There's no play in the clip. There's lots of retention. It holds the knife about that far out of your pocket. So a reasonable amount of the knife is sticking up out of your pocket, but not too much. The knife does deploy quickly. It's snappy. As far as blade play goes, there's almost no up and down, and honestly, a microscopic amount of up and down. It's like I talked about in a recent video. I'm okay with that in automatic knives up to a certain price. You get over $200 and you start talking about Pro-Tex and Micro-Tex, I don't want to see that. Or if it is there, no, in fact, I don't want to see any up and down. If there is going to be play, I can handle a microscopic amount of side to side. There's a little more than a microscopic amount of side to side blade play in this knife, but it has been used and it's nowhere near the side to side play that I was experiencing in the Boker Kalashnikov. I did not like that. This is okay at $125, not bothered by it. Let's talk about that lock there. So to disengage it, when you push this in, it moves the larger part of that cylinder out of the way of the blade tang, allowing you to push the knife back into place. I'll let you show what it does when it locks up here. You can see it pushes that cylinder over back in front of the tang, and then as soon as you push the button again to fire the blade, it moves it out of the way, and the coil spring on the inside of the pivot, which I assume is what they're using there, fires the blade straight out. Everything feels solid. Everything feels reliable. There's a couple of things here. It's not perfectly centered, but again, this one was used. I handled another one of these at a gun show, and it was similar, but again, it was used, so I don't know how, I can't really judge it. A little bit, there's some gaps right here between the liner and the scale, but nothing rattles, nothing feels like it's not, it deploys readily. It feels solid when it's locked into place. The safety works. The blade doesn't wiggle around. Everything feels pretty good. So that brings my next point. When I was younger and I purchased my Kershaw Blur, which if you're familiar with my channel, you'll know that was kind of the knife that got everything started. This was nowhere near the time where I was interested in Hinderer knives, but I'm 31 now, and this back when I was like 19 or so, I bought a non-USA made, I'm assuming, Kershaw Blur from Walmart. Back in that glass display case that we all go back. Anyways, this is what I do in Walmart. When my wife goes shopping for something that I'm not interested in, I wander off back to that section. I just look at knives, whether I'm interested in them or not. I'm sure a lot of you can echo that. But I was 19. I went back there and I was looking for something, black and tactical, and I found that in the Kershaw Blur for 54 bucks. Back then, I think it was a Taiwan version. I don't think that they were made in the USA back then. I'm not even sure if they made the S30V version of it back then, but I bought that. 54 bucks, black tanto and serrated, because that's what I was into back then. A lot of us were into that kind of stuff when we first get into this. And I love that knife, and about a month later, 3 weeks to a month later, I wanted another cool knife like that. So I went back and I found this one, assisted, not the switch version, because back then you couldn't carry or purchase automatic knives in Kansas. I found that. I think it was a tanto, maybe not. Maybe it was a drop point, and it was also serrated. And I bought that, and I thought it was really cool. Now, here was the problem with it, though. Like I said, it was assisted, but it still had this safety switch. So when it was in this position, I pushed this up, and the blade had play. Now, I think, having purchased that knife for about 60 bucks, I think that version of the knife then was not USA made. I could be wrong about that, but given the fact that this one is 125 bucks, and it seems kind of on point to me. And this assisted one that I bought way back then, 2000, man, what would that have been? Like 2007? Does that sound right? Has this knife been around that long? Yeah, 2007. Given back then it was 65 bucks. I'm thinking it was non-USA made. Anyways, the blade had play in it in the closed position. And what that made me want to do, which was stupid, was pull as hard as I could to see if I could actually overcome this safety switch. Well, whatever metal was actually responsible for holding the blade in place, I ended up shearing. And I did manage to pull that blade out, but what it did is it rendered the whole knife useless. I broke the safety, I broke part of the plunge lock, I'm guessing. It was really dumb, and I never should have done it. Pulling that out didn't prove anything, but it made me not like that version. Now, this version, when it's locked into place, this USA version, I'm not feeling any play there whatsoever. I 100% believe that blade is going to stay firmly in place in the closed position. So, no issues there. Like I said, this is 125 bucks. So Gerber has put a sour taste in my mouth over time with their non-USA made stuff. Other than this knife, I don't know, and I don't have any experience with any of Gerber's other USA stuff. So I can't speak to that. And the only, this knife, I've only handled it in used forms. But I gotta say, I'm fairly impressed with it. This is S30V. The Benchmade AFO2 is 154 cm, and that knife is like 200 bucks, maybe more. I don't even know if they make it anymore. But truthfully, off the top of my head, I can't think of another more hard use oriented S30V USA made automatic knife that I like more than this one. That's very specific, but I honestly can't think of any. Like the Benchmade CLA is still like 170, 180 bucks. ProTech has some less expensive stuff, but I feel like it's not as robust as this one. This knife feels robust and with a purpose. It's definitely thick. This is not a knife that I would recommend for EDC at all. Definitely not. But whether or not it is a knife that is good for EDC is not an all-encompassing, definitive, yes, this is a good knife, or no, it's not a good knife. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you're somebody who's looking for a heavy-duty automatic knife and you're limited to under 150 bucks and you like USA made and you like S30V or premium blade steels, this isn't a bad choice. If you're here for validation and you've already purchased this knife, I can't say that you made a bad choice, The downside to this is maybe they're going to have some fit and finish issues. And it's super thick and chunky. Those are the downsides there. Blade steel's great. Blade shape is great. Ergonomics are great. I love the position of the button, and despite what most people think about recessed buttons, I actually really like this one. It's easier for me to find pulling this. If I'm on a ladder or something and I'm holding something up and I'm not looking, it's easier for my thumb to find that button than one that's recessed. And I know that that's it's obviously I'm going to find the button either way, but that just feels, my thumb gravitates towards this a little bit more readily, a little bit more naturally. Everybody's going to have different opinions on that. I have no interest whatsoever in discussing self-defense tactics with a knife like this. Please, your comments are wasted on me in terms of whether or not it's useful for self-defense. I don't care. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings. I do not view knives that way, and I know some knives are made that way. I just don't care. But anyways, that's what I think of when I think about how easy the button is to get to. It's not how quickly can I deploy this to save my life. It's, you know, is my thumb easily finding the button if I need this knife to deploy in a pinch, you know, and that's kind of how I look at it. But I don't know, you know, I can't say that this is going to go on my most recommended knives playlist. It's not one that I can readily recommend to everybody. Do I think this knife, you know, will serve some people really well? Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, if you've already bought this knife, I don't think you made a bad choice. But you know, make sure you check the laws in your local area. Is it legal to own an automatic knife? Is it legal to carry an automatic knife? Is it legal to carry a knife that's this big? It's also large, so keep that in mind. If all of the answers to all of those questions are yes, it's legal, it's totally legal, and I really like how this knife looks, and I've got $125 to spend, and I want something that's dependable and heavy duty for an automatic knife, and I like USA made stuff, then yeah, go ahead. This is a good knife for you. You know, other than that though, maybe wait for some other stuff. But that's going to be pretty much it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do of course have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So please check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, then please subscribe to my channel because there is definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching and have a great day.